I longed for a family. After a life of solitude, I thought I finally had one, but my days are filled with drudgery at their hands.
Work till you drop dead.
As I wither away, barely fed or rested, my husband adds insult to injury. In despair, I cry out.
Someone, help me!
My name is Lucy, a 29-year-old office worker. As my friends married off one by one and started popping out babies, my motivation kicked into high gear. After a desperate husband hunt, I tied the knot at 30. I wanted to get married in my 20s if I could, but I won't be greedy. I'm just grateful that someone married me, with my plain face and lack of redeeming qualities. My husband's name is John. He's not a fighter, as he decided to marry plain old me. John isn't an office worker, he helps out with his family's farm. They say farmers have a hard time finding wives, but I don't know if that's true or not. But apparently that was exactly the case for John, and he was so worried about not meeting anyone that he signed up for a marriage hunting website. Was it chance or fate that matched us? In any case, it was love at first sight, and we quickly started dating and got hitched. John is kind and dependable. If not for the farm, he'd have married much sooner. It's because he was a farmer that he was still single at 35 when he met me. I was moved, thinking that fate really does exist. But life isn't that sweet. Right after the wedding, I learned why John couldn't get married.
Quit your job and help with the farm.
These are the words he said just 3 days into our marriage.
What are you saying? You said I could keep working after we got married. I said you could keep working, but not at your current company.
What a selfish way of putting it. To me, stunned, John says,
my parents are getting old and don't have the energy. Farming is too much for me alone. Aren't married couples supposed to help each other?
Lucy, help me out here. John looked exhausted as he said it. I felt sorry for him, but I was torn, still attached to my job. But John was relentless. If you won't do farm work, then divorce is the only option. Faced with that, panicked me had already lost. I hate the thought of divorce within a month of marriage after finally finding someone. I made up my mind to quit my job. I was incredibly attached to that job. I loved it and wanted to keep at it. But family comes before work, I figured. There's a reason I feel that way. I never had a family of my own. The fact that I exist in this world means I must have parents, but by the time I came to understand things, they were already gone, and I was being raised in an orphanage. According to the staff, my mother apparently passed away from illness right after I was born. My father was still young and couldn't muster the resolve to raise me on his own. My parents had no relatives, so the moment my father abandoned me, my path to the orphanage was set. That's why I don't have a family. I love the other kids and staff at the orphanage, they're wonderful people, but they're definitely not family. I can't be spoiled, can't be selfish, can't be protected. I didn't have the environment that a real family would provide. My father would occasionally visit me at the orphanage, but only about once a year. It's a lot to ask a child to understand that this is their father, and he didn't know how to interact with me either. Despite our blood connection, we could never become a family. Maybe that's why I have an extraordinary longing for a family. And yet, the reason I couldn't get married until 30 was because I was desperate just to survive. Also, because I enjoyed my job. And now, I finally had a family. I figured it was better to let go of my job than to let go of that. I suppose my choice was already a mistake at that point. Before I knew it, time flew by. Years and years of non-stop work for 15 years. Before I knew it, I was being worked like a slave over and over again. The once kind John has retreated into the shadows, now transformed into a tyrant. The same goes for my parents-in-law. They work me like a slave. This is how my day goes. I wake up before sunrise and first prepare breakfast for the family. I immediately go to the fields to check on the crops. If there are problems, I deal with them. Even if there aren't, I patrol the vast fields alone. By the time I finish making my rounds, the sun has fully risen. Then I return home for a bit to clean up the dishes from the family's finished breakfast. I silently eat a single piece of bread, plain. Coffee and milk are strictly prohibited. I'm only allowed a single small glass of water. Then I immediately clean the house and prepare lunch. Once that's done, I maintain the farming equipment and check stock of necessary items like fertilizer. Then I check shipping arrangements with the agricultural cooperative and the prices with wholesalers for crops we've delivered. Then I check returned products and sales. There's just so much checking. By the time that's done, it's evening. I go to the fields one more time to check on things, then return home. When harvest season comes, harvesting work gets incorporated into this schedule too. And depending on the season, various other processes like sowing seeds and tending to the soil come into play. And then, once that's done, I go back to the house again to prepare dinner. After that, I clean the bath and the house. I clean up the dishes after the family finishes eating. There's no lunch, and dinner is just a cup of soup and some pickles. And still, only one glass of water. After that, I compile the income and expenditure calculations and necessary expenses into documents and submit them. I submit them to John and my parents-in-law. This is the first time John and my parents-in-law make an appearance, and you might wonder what in the world they're doing from morning to night. The answer is nothing. My parents-in-law, who were in their 60s when we first got married, are now in their late 70s. They had that tendency from the start, but now they say they're too old and it's physically taxing, so they hardly do any farm work. I haven't seen my parents-in-law go to the fields in the past few years. As for John, he's been living thoroughly lazy days. In the beginning, he taught me the ins and outs of farming, but once he finished teaching me everything, he declared, "Well then, I'll leave the rest to you." After that, John barely helped out at all. I'm essentially working alone. After I've been on the move from morning to night, finishing both housework and farm work, my parents-in-law take the documents I hand over and yell, "Your work is too slow!" John also looks at the documents and, "What the hell is this? Don't go increasing unnecessary expenses." He scatters the papers at me. "But this fertilizer is essential for this time of year. You could cut costs more, you incompetent fool." 15 years ago, both John and my parents-in-law were doing farm work. Their sense of time is stuck in that era. It's been 15 years, and with the impact of recent social conditions, the skyrocketing of fertilizer prices won't stop. No matter how much I appeal this, it doesn't get through to them, and they say, "It's because you're incompetent," refusing to even try to understand. As a result, I'm told, "There's no need to buy clothes for you. Keep wearing old clothes. Don't eat extravagant meals. 2 meals of bread and soup are enough for you. Work for the family. If you slack off, this family will fall apart." And my meals are reduced to twice a day, just sliced bread and a cup of soup. I'm not allowed to take baths, and I just wipe myself with a wet towel every day. It's still fine in the summer. But in the winter, I've lost count of how many times I've gotten sick from that. However, no matter how poor my health gets, even if I'm running a high fever, I'm not allowed to rest. If you rest, our income will dry up. Are you trying to drive our family to ruin? John's yelling just echoes, and not once am I offered any words of concern for my well-being. Cold eyes, cold words, cold attitude. All of it conveys that both my parents-in-law and John see me as nothing more than a slave. In such a horrible environment, why don't I run away? I ask myself, but I can't find an answer. I can tell my own thoughts aren't working properly anymore. I'm surely numb. I know I should run. But the one time I brought up divorce, that was the only time John transformed. Don't abandon us, Lucy. Without you, we're finished. Saying that, John's eyes welled up with tears. The family I sought and always wanted. Having finally obtained it, I couldn't bear to let it go, and at that point, I abandoned the option of running away. Call me foolish, I can't help it. I don't expect anyone to understand my feelings. I just want to protect my family, that's all. Unfortunately, at 45, I can no longer hope for children, but John and my parents-in-law are still going strong. And I have the crops that will respond if I work hard. The fact that I think this way probably means I'm already broken. I don't feel anything anymore, no matter what I'm told, no matter what I'm blamed for, even if I see my family living their lazy days. Every day, I just repeated the same things like a robot. But after 15 years of marriage, even I, in a state like brainwashing, finally realized. This situation is bizarre. I shut myself in my room after finishing a day's work. I can hear John's raucous laughter from the living room, and my parents-in-law yelling, "Make us a late-night snack." I feel I must obey my parents-in-law's orders, but my body won't move. There's a mirror in front of me. I haven't worn makeup in ages, but the vanity I've had since I got married reflects my face. In it, I see a version of myself that looks elderly. I gently place a hand on the mirror. Who is this? This is me. It's unmistakably me. Every day I was exposed to the sun's rays and made to work even in heavy rain. Working non-stop from early morning to late at night, I couldn't have nutritious meals. In that state, there's no way I could maintain a youthful appearance. Gently running my fingers through my hair, I find clumps of it falling out. I've reached my limit. I cover my face, feeling the urge to cry. But no tears come out. I'm dehydrated. And then, at that moment, I'm going out drinking, so give me money. Suddenly my door burst open and John barged in, yelling. What? But what about your money? Obviously, I used it all up ages ago. Just shut up and hand it over. Where's your wallet? That's for tomorrow's shopping. You're just gonna waste it anyway, right? Better to not have it so you can save properly. I'll use it for you. John pulls money out of my wallet without giving me any say. I'm so thin and weak now, there's no way I could stop him. Oh right, I want champagne tomorrow, so have it ready. Even after snatching money from my wallet, John still makes his usual extravagant demands. Where does he expect me to get money from? I'm at my limit. My muttered words don't reach John, and he leaves laughing. Maybe I should just leave this house. As soon as I think that, my unsteady body starts to move. Before I know it, I'm outside, and I've walked to the bustling city center. The pain in my feet brings me back to my senses. The lively downtown, dazzling neon lights, and the cheerfully laughing people passing by. It's like a different world. And then I face reality. Even if I leave home, where would I go? I can't go back to my old job now. Times have completely changed, and I know the work I used to do is no longer useful now. But having done only farming for so long, I don't have the courage to dive into a new field either. Is working in this house forever the only path left for me? I say path, but what I see in front of me is a sheer cliff. As I stand frozen, my mental state is pitch black. Still, to somehow survive, I suppose I have no choice but to return to that house. With heavy steps, I was about to head home when…
"Geez, John, you drank too much."
A woman's voice coming out of a bar made me stop in my tracks. I only thought that he has the same name as my husband, but I'm surprised by the person I see when I turn around. I instinctively hide behind a signboard and quietly peek, and there I see John. And with him is a woman clinging affectionately to his arm. John grins sloppily at the young, beautiful woman. "What is that?" My bewildered mutter doesn't reach John. The two don't notice me and start walking, so I hurriedly follow after them. I keep my distance so as not to be spotted and secretly tail them. The pleasantly drunk pair enters a hotel without hesitation. It's not the kind of hotel you stay at for a trip. It's a hotel for grown men and women. They must be used to coming here. The two enter without any hesitation, and I can only watch them go. What is this? Before I know it, tears are rolling down my cheeks. I've been worked to the bone from morning to night, telling myself it's for my family for 15 years. I've endured and worked hard for my tyrannical parents-in-law and the despotic John, and yet John steals money from me and cheats with another woman. He looks so happy, grinning from ear to ear at me, who has completely forgotten how to smile. This is too much. With the sensation that the ground is crumbling beneath me, I just keep crying. I don't remember much after that. I was in a daze-like state when I came to, and before I knew it, I had arrived home. My parents-in-law are already asleep, and the house is pitch dark. In the darkness, I return to my room without turning on any lights and sit down. My feet hurt from walking a long distance, but my heart hurts far more than that. I don't feel like doing anything and can't sleep, so I space out until morning comes. I know in the back of my mind what I should do. But I don't know how I should do it. Right now, I don't have money, of course, but I also don't have the will or energy to take action. Someone, help me. Even if I mutter it, no one will help me. Desperate to survive, I hadn't really made any friends. My companions from the orphanage are all desperate to survive too. I can't consult with them. The staff at the orphanage are busy too. It's not a place I should rely on after leaving ages ago. At a total loss, I'm simply at my wit's end. In my room, documents have piled up into mountains. I still haven't been allowed to purchase even one computer, and the old-fashioned manual work is nearing its limit. More than that, my mental limit is nearing. As I'm spacing out, the sun rises, and my parents-in-law come yelling.
"What are you doing?"
Because normally, I should have long finished preparing breakfast and gone to work in the fields by now. My parents-in-law, who never move a muscle themselves, who claim they're too old yet seem more energetic than me, who never do a thing. These people made John the way he is. The world looks coldly upon me, having come from an orphanage. If I make the slightest mistake, I'm met with eyes that say, "I knew it." But do people really fail because they don't have parents? Then can you say John is a respectable person? Has John, who had proper parents and was raised with his family, become a respectable adult? The answer is no. Why am I, who lives earnestly, berated while John, who does terrible things, gets to laugh? I want to hurl these questions at my parents-in-law. The moment I think that, the front door opens and John comes home. In high spirits, John is tattled on by my parents-in-law.
"Your wife is slacking off. Why haven't you prepared breakfast or done the field work? Get moving for the family."
Family? Is that woman also your family?
What?
You're cheating, aren't you? I saw you last night. Entering a hotel with a woman. I say it clearly, but John doesn't look the least bit guilty. "Oh, so you saw," he says. "Well, of course I'd prefer a young,
beautiful woman over an old hag of a wife who looks elderly, right? I want a divorce.
Oh, is that so?
And then what will you do after divorcing and leaving? That's, with alimony, I'll go somewhere. Alimony? I'm not paying a cent. You're not paying? I'm not cheating or anything. You just admitted it.
When was the last time I talked back so assertively? I desperately hold back, feeling like I'll be quickly shot down if I let my guard down. John laughs mockingly. Where's your proof?
Proof. I clearly saw with my own eyes.
As if that counts as proof.
Without photos or obvious evidence that anyone can see, don't think you'll get any alimony. That's... Not only that, this would be a divorce based on your own selfish reasons, so I'd be the one getting alimony from you.
What? I can tell my face has gone pale. I can't accept it. I think it's unreasonable. But what John is saying makes sense too. No matter how skilled a lawyer I hire, without proof, I can't substantiate John's cheating and can't claim alimony. If that happens, I'll be kicked out penniless and instantly be living on the streets. I had no knowledge of splitting marital assets at this time, so I could only envision the worst future.
That's awful. If you don't like it, get out. If you're not leaving, do the housework properly. Be grateful I'm letting you stay.
John pauses there for a moment. With a defiant smile.
You work until your very last breath for our family.
Saying that, he left the room with my parents-in-law.
Until the end.
All I can do is mutter to myself. The meaning of the end is clear. Until my life runs out.
Is my life going to remain that of a slave?
Tears that should have dried up start flowing again. The tears flowing from my emaciated, horrible state seem to chip away at my life.
How could this be? How could this be?
I cry out. I cry and cry, but still, the current situation doesn't change. Even when my tears dry up and I'm in a daze, my world still doesn't change. Should I just disappear somewhere like this? Rather than being worked to the bone until the very end, I might as well. As I think that, a nostalgic name catches the corner of my eye. Is this an envelope? The sender's name is that of the orphanage. Buried in a mountain of documents, I hadn't noticed its existence. Wondering what it could be, I open the seal, and inside is a letter. Amazingly, it's a letter from my father. My father, who used to visit me at the facility when I was a child, gradually stopped coming as I grew older, and eventually, we stopped seeing each other altogether. That's why I never told my father about where I worked after leaving the facility or anything else. Naturally, my father doesn't know I got married either. This is a letter from him. Not knowing my whereabouts, my father sent it to the orphanage, and the staff forwarded it to the address they had for where I married into. Thinking, what could he want at this point? I open it, and inside are surprisingly warm words. The letter from my father starts with an apology. When I entered adolescence, I became irritable every time we met, and he no longer knew how to interact with me, so he found it hard to visit. It was an apology for not being able to do anything for me. Furthermore, he was posted overseas for work and spent over 10 years abroad, so he couldn't contact me. After those apologies, he asks about my recent situation. Are you doing well?
I'm sorry for being a lousy father. At this age, I finally feel like I've mustered up the resolve to be a parent. If you're having any troubles, please contact me. As your father, I'll do everything I can. I know it's too late and I wouldn't blame you for being angry. But still, I am your father. I wish for your happiness, Lucy.
As I read on, tears fall onto the letter. I think he's selfish. I think the father who abandoned me after mom passed away is selfish. But surely, my father must have struggled too. Rather than raising me without any confidence, I'd be happier in an orphanage. I understand now that my father was thinking of my happiness in his own way. Now that I'm an adult, my rebellious phase is over, and I can understand how difficult it was for my father. Surely, my father was also grief-stricken when his beloved wife suddenly passed. My father loved my mother so much he couldn't recover from the despair. And now, my father has finally recovered, is facing reality, and trying to face me. He's trying to be a father. That made me happier than anything. My father, who wishes for my happiness, is concerned about my current situation and cares for me. I feel like the distance between my father and me up until now is melting away. Before I know it, I have a phone in my hand. I don't have a mobile phone. There's only the house phone. I'll get yelled at if I use it without permission, but it seems John is out again and I don't sense my parents-in-law's presence, so they must have gone out too. Now's my chance. I dial the phone number written after "please contact me if anything comes up." My heartbeat is loud. I can tell I'm nervous. I make the call even though I don't know what I should say. After a few rings, a nostalgic but slightly aged voice, my father's voice, reaches my ear.
Hello.
The moment I hear it, everything I had been thinking of saying is blown away. Tears spill out.
Hello? Who is this?
Well.
What?
Before I know it, words have left my mouth. Help me. Lucy? I didn't say my name. The last time I met my father was around the end of middle school, I think. My voice should have completely changed now that I'm an adult, but my father remembered. He noticed. Dad. Lucy. It is you. What's wrong?
Dad, please, help me.
Skipping over greetings like long time no see, and everything else, I yell. I yell and break down crying.
Please, Dad, help me.
John and my parents-in-law returned home late that night. The three of them were quite drunk, so they must have been out drinking, making me work while they live the high life. But they better be prepared, because their reign is about to end. Half a month after the phone call with my father. Sooner than I expected, my father contacts me. And then, my father comes to the house. On the day my father is coming, I don't wake up early as usual and sleep in until the time when I would normally have finished preparing breakfast. I'm woken up by the sound of my room's door being pounded on violently.
Lucy, how long are you gonna sleep? Don't screw around. What about breakfast? The field work?
Even as he pounds, the door doesn't open. Because I secretly put a lock on it. To John, who's tyrannical as always, I retort.
Can't you prepare your own breakfast at least?
How refreshing that moment is. I finally talk back with the retorts I've been holding back all this time. But John, not backing down, shoots back.
Since when did you get such a self-important attitude?
My parents-in-law, who are probably beside John, also say,
if you don't want to be kicked out, hurry it up.
With their usual self-important attitude.
If you keep living such lazy days, you'll go senile.
When I say that,
cheeky brat,
is the response I get.
This feels great.
As I hole up in my room like that, it starts to feel like they might break down the door. They want to work me to the bone that badly? They hate moving themselves that much? I'm amazed. But just as I thought the door might seriously be reaching its limit, the doorbell rang, signaling a visitor. Inside the house, John and my parents-in-law are tyrants, but it would look bad if people found out they were bullying their daughter-in-law. Especially in the countryside, where many of the neighbors are also farmers. John stops yelling too and goes quiet. My mother-in-law, Mary, hurries to get the door. She's still spry enough to run, I see. Mary shouts,
Hey! Some rich-looking man is calling for Lucy. What? For Lucy?
As John says that suspiciously, I forcefully open the door.
Yes, I'm coming. Lucy!
I shake off John, who's trying to stop me in a panic, and run to the entrance. Where did I, malnourished and emaciated, get that kind of strength, you ask? It's an adrenaline rush. And I'm light because I'm so thin. Dodging John's hands, I headed for the entrance.
Dad!
There stood my father. Actually, I've met with my father several times since that phone call. Because John and my parents-in-law never come around during farm work. It's easy to secretly make time to meet. I got yelled at for not being able to do my share of the work, but John and my parents-in-law don't know I've been meeting my father.
What? Your father?
John, who chased after me to the entrance at the sound of my voice, widens his eyes.
That's right.
I answer and turn back to John.
Let me introduce you. This is my birth father.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for always taking care of my daughter. What? Oh, you're welcome.
I told John when we first met that my father is alive, but we've become estranged. John must have completely forgotten about the existence of my father, whom I haven't seen once in the past 15 years. And now he's suddenly appeared right in front of him. It's no wonder he's surprised.
But why is Lucy's father here all of a sudden? It's not sudden. We've been in contact many times. With this mobile phone. What? When did you get a mobile phone? Dad gave it to me.
That's right. As soon as I reunited with my father, he got me a mobile phone. He said he would pay for it too, so I gratefully accepted his offer. Thanks to that, I could contact him without John or my parents-in-law getting suspicious, and we could meet frequently.
What? When did that happen?
John, was it?
You're Lucy's husband? Yes.
You're quite the stutterer, John. But it's understandable. My father, dressed impeccably in a suit, has a dignified air about him. He exudes the aura of someone who's climbed the corporate ladder and become an executive. And? John freezes at my father's question.
What? What do you mean, and? Why is my daughter so terribly emaciated?
John is surprised by that question. Of course he is. We rarely run into neighbors in the countryside, but when we do, they worry about how skinny I've become. And how much I've aged. John and my parents-in-law brushed it off to acquaintances, saying it's her constitution, but...
It seems Lucy has a constitution that makes it hard for her to gain weight.
He seems to intend to get away with the same excuse. But that's naive.
Is there any constitution that makes someone this emaciated?
A thunderous rebuke. At my father's rebuke, John's legs give out and he falls on his behind. It certainly is intimidating.
No matter how you look at it, this level of skinniness must mean there's some health problem. Don't you think to have my daughter see a doctor? We've been busy. You can only be busy if you're alive. What do you think my daughter is? I'm sorry.
John can act tough against weak me, but he's awfully meek against someone stronger than him. My eyes are cold as I watch John turn pale.
By the way, I could hear you screaming at my daughter to make breakfast and do farm work. What was that about?
Next, my father glares at my pale-faced parents-in-law.
Our son's wife, your daughter, is always thinking of slacking off. I've had a chance to tour your fields a few times, but was I imagining that my daughter was the only one out there? Tour? When did you? Is there a problem with a parent observing their daughter's workplace?
No, well,
Is there? No.
even my parents-in-law are getting pushed back by my father's forcefulness. In my mind, I'm giving my father a standing ovation.
Amazing. Dad, you're wonderful. I want to do that too.
I had been completely weakened by 15 years of brainwashing, but I've become quite energetic since reuniting with my father. I'm still emaciated, but since my father started treating me to meals and I began getting proper nutrition, I can think clearly. So I can't just leave everything to my father. Or rather, I want to speak up like him. Dad,
Lucy, here's what we discussed.
Thank you. As if remembering, my father hands me a thick envelope.
There's so much here. Reading it all would be.
As I'm bewildered,
You only need the top 3 pages or so.
he says, putting me at ease. I take them out, give them a once-over, and a defiant smile spreads across my face. I look up from the documents at John's face.
What is it?
To the perplexed John, I lift my hair and flash a smile. Behold, this supple hair. My hair that had been falling out like crazy from malnutrition is now supple and beautiful like it once was. It may be difficult to get it back to how it was in my youth due to my age, though. Still, it's on a different level from my hair quality just a little while ago. And so, having fully appreciated the beauty of my hair, I show John the documents.
My father is an executive at a large company and has quite a few connections. One of them is with a detective agency, and he had them investigate your conduct.
What? Yes, let's take a look here. Can't you see it?
Has all that fooling around made your eyesight go bad? What did you say?
I, who has good eyesight from continuous farm work, will show you.
This here is the results report on your infidelity investigation, supervised by the detective agency. What? You can't understand just from a few long words lined up? No way!
In other words, this is proof of your cheating.
What? You can stop saying that. In just this past half month, more than enough evidence has been gathered, so I'd like to hire a lawyer and proceed with divorce. Any objections? Major objection. I'm not getting divorced.
Why?
If we get divorced, I won't be able to live like this having fun. Stop having fun and work.
15 years. It's been 15 years. 15 years since we got married, and I've endured through it all. No matter what was said to me, I endured and endured, enough to explode many times over. The anger I unleash as a result must make for a terrifyingly demon-like expression. In fact, John's face has gone pale just from looking at me. It's nothing compared to earlier when he went pale at my father's rebuke.
Now, Lucy, are you saying you're going to abandon us old folks? Were you that cold of a daughter-in-law?
Oh my, Mary.
If you're calling me cold, then just how cold are you all for working your daughter-in-law to the bone? Antarctic level? Arctic level?
Which one is it?
Well, Antarctica and the Arctic are just as cold, aren't they?
Wrong. Antarctica is colder.
So if I'm Arctic level cold, that means you people are Antarctic level cold, doesn't it? That's such a complicated analogy. If you don't get it, don't laze around.
Work and study.
If I work, will I understand the difference between Antarctica and the Arctic? Okay, enough about Antarctica and the Arctic already. You're the one who brought it up, Lucy.
I cut off the conversation, saying I've had enough of the analogy. And then, I turn back to John again. I crouch down in front of John, who's still sitting on the floor, and peer into his face. At my sharp gaze, emaciated but having regained a strong spirit, John lets out a small scream from the back of his throat. So, John.
Lucy, your face is scary.
Regarding your infidelity, there is irrefutable proof.
Stop dragging out the end of your sentences. It's scary.
You'll agree to a divorce, yes? With a lump sum alimony payment, of course.
That's a problem.
What? No, I got it. I'll pay the alimony and divorce you. Faced with me looking like a demon from hell, John, now teary-eyed, nods and agrees to the divorce. I stand up, exasperated, and look behind me. Where I look, my father is giving a thumbs up. So I flash a big smile and give a thumbs up too. As for what happened after that, well, it's pretty obvious, but to sum it up, John and my parents-in-law were ruined. Thanks to the skilled lawyer my father introduced me to, the divorce went through without a hitch. And then there's the matter of the lump sum alimony payment to me. The bunch who lazed around and spent all the money I earned obviously have no ability to pay. As a result, they paid with the money from selling the house. It's too little compensation for the long period of 15 years, but I'll let it slide since making them suffer has meaning. The three of them ended up taking shelter in an old apartment. If they worked hard and earned money through farming, they could probably return to their former lifestyle soon. But after 15 years of thorough laziness, my ex-husband and former parents-in-law had completely forgotten how to do farm work and their bodies could do nothing. It was their first time doing farm work in ages, starting not from square one but from the negatives. Naturally, they couldn't do it properly at all, and the crops ended up in a miserable state. Almost none of it was at a level that could be shipped out, and even when it could, there was a storm of complaints about the quality being too different from before. As a result, they had to close down the business. The shock caused my former father-in-law to collapse, and Mary developed dementia. They were sent to care facilities in the blink of an eye, and then they really ran out of money. My ex-husband is apparently leading a hellish life in debt. He contacted me once asking for help, but I just thought as if I care and that was that. We're strangers now, after all. I've met with my real father many times since then. Even though he's getting on in years, he's still energetically doing his job. He's so cool. Our discord hasn't completely disappeared, but I want to take our time and slowly mend our relationship. When we meet, there's still an awkward feeling between us, but I'm sure that will go away soon too. I can feel my father's love, and I cherish him too. I'm sure this is what a real family is. As for what I'm up to, I've used the alimony I received to make a fresh start. I've begun a new life in a new home. I'm not in perfect health yet, so I'm just working part-time, but I want to gradually become able to do a proper job. Already 45? No, I'm still 45. My life is just beginning. James' first winter had arrived. The weather forecast reported a record chill for the day.
I wonder if Susan and James are okay.
They were the first to come to mind, my son's wife and their newborn. I hoped they weren't falling ill from the cold. Worried, I messaged Susan on my mobile phone that night.
Are you and the baby all right? Hope you guys don't catch a cold.
But after sending the message 2 or 3 times, not only did I not get a reply, but she hadn't even read them. She's serious by nature, so I hoped she wasn't overexerting herself. Waiting an hour more, I tried calling just to be sure, but again, no answer. Something must have happened. Without a second thought, I threw on a thick jacket, rushed out of my house, and drove to my son's family's apartment. Ringing the doorbell yielded no response, and I imagined Susan collapsed inside. I immediately called the apartment manager to have the door unlocked. No lights were on inside, only the faint intrusion of streetlights. Groping along the wall, I relied on memory to find the switch. But no matter how many times I flipped it, the electricity wouldn't come on. What's going on? Anxiety and irritation were about to make me explode. Reluctantly, I lit up the interior with my mobile phone's light as I stepped in.
Susan, are you there?
Perhaps they were just out. As I was about to turn back, I thought I heard a baby's cry from the direction of the bedroom.
Susan, are you there?
I immediately headed toward the bedroom where I thought I heard the voice.
Susan!
There, Susan was shivering from the cold, wrapping the newborn James in a blanket, trying desperately to protect him.
What happened?
Shining the light, I was shocked to see Susan's long hair, her pride and joy, chopped off nearly to baldness.
This is terrible. How could this happen?
My name is Elizabeth, and I am 61 years old. I have worked as a hairdresser for many years in my home-based salon. Enjoying leisurely chats with my beloved clients while working has been my greatest joy. The shop was something my husband and I started together. He passed away from cancer at a young age. It was right after our son, John, was born. Yet, I didn't falter and raised John on my own. However, John wouldn't listen to anything I said and started skipping classes in middle school. When he did go, he caused trouble, and I was called to apologize countless times. After graduating middle school, John started going out every day. Was it a feeling of inferiority because he didn't have a father? Or was it my failure as a mother? Unable to find an answer, I was always worried about John's future. So when one day, out of the blue, John said,
"I want to be a hairdresser,"
I wondered if I was dreaming. What brought this on?
"Being a hairdresser is cool, you know,"
John replied with a laugh. Kids do end up following in their parents' footsteps, no matter what they say. Regardless of the reason, I was happy to see my son finally showing interest in his future. John graduated from beauty school smoothly and began working as an assistant at the shop where the beauty school graduate owned. Susan, who would later become his wife, was also working there, and it seems John was smitten with her at first sight. After a vigorous courtship, they decided to get married. John introduced me to Susan with a confident expression.
"I've decided to marry Susan."
"Nice to meet you, I'm Susan."
"You're a hairdresser too, right?"
"I look forward to learning from you." Susan was a beautiful woman with a bright smile and long hair that suited her perfectly. "I hope we get along well." I liked Susan the moment I saw her. One day, a year after their marriage, John said he wanted to start his own shop. Though he hadn't been an assistant for long, John seemed to have gained confidence as a hairdresser.
"I want to have my own shop and compete on my own skills as a hairdresser."
Honestly, I was a bit anxious. I knew from years of experience that it's not easy for a newcomer to start their own business in this field. But I couldn't ignore John's serious ambition.
"How much money do you have?"
When I asked, John showed me his bank account with a slightly troubled expression and a sigh. Though his income as an assistant came in every month, he was spending just as much. This wouldn't get him anywhere near the financial stability needed for independence. Most of John's hard-earned income was squandered on frivolities. Perhaps I should have advised him to give up then, but instead, I smiled and acquiesced. "Don't worry about the money." Maybe I was trying to make up for the loneliness of not having a father around all these years. Truth be told, I hadn't touched the life insurance money left by my late husband. "For John's sake, I'm sure you will understand." As I gazed at the photo of my late husband, I spoke to him in my heart. Since Linda, who is well-versed in real estate, was among the guests, I decided to consult her. "I think that place would be good for you." It was a property that had been used as a hair salon until 6 months ago, but the owner, being elderly, had apparently closed the shop. "The location isn't bad, so it might just be perfect for your son's startup." Furthermore, when it came time to start the renovation work, thanks to the help of other guests, the construction went smoothly. And the opening of the shop came in no time. I never thought you would become independent in such a short period. You better thank everyone. You can't do anything on your own, after all. I know that. I'm grateful to you, Mom. After that, I entrusted John with the bank account containing the remainder of my husband's estate. The purchase and renovation costs of the property turned out to be unexpectedly low, so more than half of my husband's estate was still left.
This is a gift from Dad to you. Use it carefully for business expenses. Don't ever waste it.
Yeah. I'm not a kid, I know without being told every time. John chuckled, somewhat annoyed.
Elizabeth, please rest assured. I'll keep a strict eye on John to make sure he doesn't use it for anything strange.
I couldn't help but laugh at Susan's words. Regardless of John, having the reliable Susan helping out, I thought optimistically that I didn't need to say any more. I decided to watch over their business from afar. However, I soon realized that my thinking had been too naive. Susan, after finishing her work, would occasionally visit my shop to update me on their progress, and each time, her expression grew darker and more troubled. 3 months after my son's independent start,
John is not focusing on his work, and it's causing problems.
John? Why?
At the beginning of the shop, John was also enthusiastic. He was full of spirit, and with his skills, the business was sure to prosper. But after a month, his smile disappeared, and he began to treat the customers coldly. This continued for 3 months, and the shop's reputation gradually worsened. Eventually, customers stopped coming.
Hearing Susan's report, I was incredulous. John had been the one who wanted to have his own shop. He had been so eager before the opening. What could have happened in such a short time?
It seems John thought that being skilled as a barber would be enough, and customer service wouldn't matter. But running a shop isn't like that,
Susan said, sighing. Indeed, as Susan said, running a shop isn't just about being a good barber. Being in the service industry, customer service greatly affects the business. It seemed John lacked this basic understanding. So, what's John doing now?
It seems the lack of customers is making him irritable. He's been drinking from the daytime. This doesn't allow him to focus on work, and even less so, attracting customers. For now, when customers do come, I handle them, but if the shop's reputation continues to fall, it will only get tougher.
Susan looked like she was about to cry, but I felt the same way.
I understand. I'll have a stern word with him next time.
Thank you so much, Susan said politely, then brushed back her long hair. Your hair always looks so mesmerizing. I changed the subject to dispel the gloomy air.
I've been growing this hair since middle school,
Susan answered proudly.
That long ago?
Do you have a particular reason? Do you know about hair donation? Susan looked at me intently. Hair donation. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. Susan's eyes sparkled as she responded. It's about making wigs from real hair for children who have lost their hair due to congenital conditions, illness, or accidents. My goal is to grow my hair to donate to organizations involved in this activity. Don't you think it's wonderful to be able to help someone? I once read a magazine feature about an actress who was growing her hair for hair donation. And so I thought, maybe I could do it too.
Susan, you're still young, but that's very admirable.
I was overwhelmed by Susan's passion, and it deeply moved me. 6 months passed by since John and Susan got married, and that was when Susan became pregnant. Susan is serious by nature, and if I'm not careful, she tends to overdo things.
Susan, this is the most crucial time.
Don't overdo it. I repeatedly advised her. Every time, Susan would smile lightly and respond, "Don't worry. I'm doing my best within limits, consulting with the baby in my belly." But from what I could see, she hardly ever took a rest. Ultimately, Susan continued to work in the shop to support the household until just before her due date, but John's attitude, the father of the child, had worsened more than ever. What on earth was he thinking? Each time I received an update from Susan, I was reminded of my inadequacy as a mother. One day, after finishing work early, I went to see how my son and his wife's hair salon was doing and happened to meet John, who was just about to go out.
"Where are you going?"
"Out for a drink. No customers are coming today anyway," John said, without any sign of hurry, laughing off his circumstances. The lack of customers had become a norm for John, and he no longer showed any effort to improve the situation. "You're about to become a father, you know?" Even when I criticized him, John, as if he couldn't be bothered, waved his hand as if shooing away an insect and mounted his motorcycle. "We're not done talking. Think about Susan for once." Yeah. I'll do that when I feel like it." With a laugh, John started his motorcycle and sped off, cutting off my words. Upon entering the shop, I found Susan cleaning the floor. "Today, we managed to have one customer come in," Susan said, smiling brightly, but her face looked more haggard than one would expect of a pregnant woman.
"Are you eating properly? Make sure you're getting enough nutrition."
"Don't worry, Elizabeth.
It's not for you, Susan. It's for the baby in your belly."
I spoke a bit harshly, but I deliberately used a strong tone. Susan seemed to understand my real intention and responded with teary eyes.
"Thank you."
What's the use if the crucial father isn't there to support her at such a time? I wanted to scream at John, who wasn't there, from the bottom of my heart. According to Susan, the shop's management was far from smooth. Yet, John was out every night, spending money without any limits. It was a mistake to hand over the bank account to that child. I regretted my judgment, but it was too late. Susan never neglected her hair care, no matter how busy she was. Gently stroking her belly, Susan said, "I want to teach the child about to be born the joy of being helpful to someone." Hearing that, it made me feel that I wanted to support her as much as I could. In place of my useless son, I decided to go to the apartment where Susan and her family lived to help with her chores.
"I'm sorry for all the trouble."
"Don't worry about it. You just focus on the baby in your belly. It was my fault for raising my son this way. Because of that, Susan was suffering. Maybe it was my way of trying to make amends, however small." At the end of summer, Susan started labor earlier than expected and was rushed to the hospital. Even then, John was unreachable, wandering somewhere. I kept sending messages to John, but no matter how long I waited, I got neither a reply nor even a read receipt. What on earth is he doing at such a time? Since both of Susan's parents had already passed away, I was the only one who could be there for her. "Susan, I'm here, so don't worry." I kept offering words of encouragement to Susan, who was desperately facing childbirth. After a long and difficult labor, I heard the baby's vigorous cry. "Susan, you did it!" Tears welled up in my eyes, but John, who was supposed to be there, never showed up. My grandson James faced his first winter. The weather forecast reported record cold, as it was so cold that it was hard to get out of bed. I wondered if they were okay. The first thing that came to mind was Susan and the newly born James. I hoped neither of them had fallen ill due to the cold. Worried, I sent Susan a message on my mobile phone that night. "Are you and the baby all right? Hope you guys don't catch a cold." But after sending the message 2 or 3 times, there was no reply, not even a read. I worried that Susan might have fallen ill and become unable to move. I hoped her serious nature hadn't led her to overdo it. After waiting another hour, I called just to be sure, but the result was the same. Something must have happened. Without a second thought, I put on a thick jacket and rushed out of my home, driving to the apartment where my son's family lived. When I parked in front of the apartment, the house was enveloped in darkness. It's not unusual for families to spend the end of the year and the new year abroad, but I hadn't heard any such plans from Susan and her family. To begin with, they shouldn't have the financial leeway for travel. I rang the doorbell, but there was no response, and I imagined Susan collapsed inside. I immediately called the apartment manager to have the door opened. After thanking the manager, who said they would wait outside, I stepped into the house. There was no light anywhere, and only the whiteness of the streetlights faintly seeped in. There should be a light switch right near the entrance, if I remembered correctly. Relying on memory, I groped along the wall to find the switch. However, no matter how many times I flipped it on and off, the electricity didn't respond at all. What's going on? Filled with anxiety and irritation, I reluctantly used my mobile phone's light to illuminate the room and said, "Susan, are you here?" There was no reply when I called out in the living room. Could they just be out? Just as I was about to turn back, I thought I heard a baby's voice coming from the bedroom. "Susan? Are you there?" I immediately headed towards the bedroom where I thought I heard the voice. "Susan!" Susan was shivering from the cold, desperately wrapping her newborn, James, in a blanket to protect him. "What happened?" When I shone the light on her, to my astonishment, Susan's once prideful long hair had been chopped short, almost to a buzz cut. Her eyes were red and swollen as if she had been crying for a long time. "This is terrible. How did this happen?" I took off the jacket I was wearing and draped it over Susan. "It's okay now. You don't have to force yourself, just tell me what you can." "What happened?" Susan began to speak in a slow voice. John had continued to go out every day, just as he did before James was born. Eventually, they could no longer afford the electricity bill. Susan had reached her limit and scolded John, hoping he would show more responsibility as a father. But her hopes did not reach John. Enraged, John, finding practice hair-cutting scissors nearby, began to carelessly cut Susan's long hair. Susan initially tried to resist, but stopped, fearing any harm might accidentally come to James. "Now you won't dare show your face in public," John said, laughing. I was at a loss for words at my son's cruel actions. "Why didn't you tell me it had gotten this bad?" "I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I'm sorry." Susan began to blame herself again. "It's not your fault, Susan. I'm not blaming you. The one at fault is John. You did nothing wrong." Susan must have kept silent not to worry me. I hugged Susan tightly as she cried. This situation was the result of me spoiling John to the extreme. Filled with frustration at my own inadequacy and anger towards my son's inability to empathize with others, my heart was aflame. I took a deep breath and called John. "Mom, it's been a while. What's up all of a sudden?" "I just wanted to hear your voice after so long. How are things there? Are Susan and James doing well?" "Of course. Everyone's doing fine. Nobody answers the home phone. Where are you now?" John paused for a moment as if searching for an excuse. "Actually, the 3 of us are in Hawaii. We'll be back next week." "Oh, Hawaii, huh?
That sounds nice.
John boldly lied, thinking I was unaware. What was the point of all my efforts for John? After losing my husband when I was young, I worked non-stop as a hairdresser. All to raise John into a decent person. So when John said he wanted to become a hairdresser and start his own business, I didn't hesitate to fulfill his wish. Yet, John carelessly spent the inheritance left by his father for his own pleasures, without a thought for my feelings. Even worse, he treated his wife and child with unimaginable cruelty. I could never forgive him. My expectations for John turned into disappointment.
What would you like as a souvenir? Look forward to it. Anything is fine. You're coming back next week, right? Just come back safely. Hey, Mom, you sound a bit off. What's wrong?
John seemed to be saying something else, but I hung up without paying him any further attention. I thanked the manager who was waiting outside the apartment and decided to take Susan and James back to my home. Then, I called everywhere I could think of. A week passed, and I received a call from John on my mobile phone. He was in high spirits, saying he had just landed at the airport. I'm back. I even bought souvenirs for you. John was trying to play the part of the dutiful son now, but my heart wasn't fooled.
That's nice.
I replied in a monotone voice, but John seemed oblivious to the change in my tone. Soon, a taxi stopped in front of me. Apparently, he had enjoyed his trip to Hawaii, as you could clearly see the tan lines from sunglasses around his eyes while he unloaded tons of luggage from the trunk. He took out keys from his pocket and headed towards the house where his wife and son were supposed to be waiting. He probably thought the door would open easily once he turned the key. However, no matter how many times he tried, the key wouldn't fit the lock.
What's this? What's going on?
John voiced his irritation. I quietly approached from behind and asked with a smile, "Did you enjoy your trip to Hawaii?" Though my heart was boiling with anger.
Mom, you knew?
Seeing me, John somehow looked relieved, as if misunderstanding my presence.
Listen, Mom. I just got back and tried to enter the house, but the key won't fit. It must be some kind of prank by her. Susan must have done this because I went on a trip alone.
He seemed to want to play the victim, blaming Susan. You left Susan and newborn James to go on a trip, and what were you doing?
I've told you 1,000,000 times. I was in Hawaii with my family.
Didn't you just say you went on a trip alone? When I pointed out the contradiction, John was at a loss for words.
To think you could lie about going to Hawaii with your family. Susan was, cut off from electricity, shivering in the cold, holding James close to keep him warm. And to cut off Susan's long hair she was so proud of, don't you feel any remorse as a human being?
That was bad, I admit. But I really need to get inside the house now. It's freezing. John showed no remorse, rubbing his arms for warmth.
The cold Susan and James experienced was nothing compared to this. And your home isn't here anymore. I've canceled the apartment lease. You'll have to find your own place to live from now on. Canceled? Why would you do something like that?
John panicked, but the apartment lease was in my name to begin with. Since we couldn't keep talking outside, I took John to a nearby cafe to listen to him. John sipped the coffee he ordered, probably not tasting anything. His face went pale as he shifted his gaze between me and the coffee.
You were struggling to pay the electricity bill, yet you could afford a trip to Hawaii? About that.
John grimaced, but eventually started to talk. He said he had been showing off to friends and female customers he met at the shop right after opening, using his father's inheritance to live it up. Such spending would quickly deplete even a large inheritance, something John knew well. Yet, after running through the inheritance, John continued to borrow money to buy gifts for his friends and take them on trips.
The shop isn't doing well, yet you're quite the spender.
Don't worry.
I'm a professional hairdresser. If I put in the effort, customers will come, and I can support my family.
Where this confidence came from, John couldn't say, but he answered with conviction. I gave John a cold look.
About your shop, I've already sold it. All the equipment, too. It's too late to get it back now.
And shattered his baseless confidence.
You're lying, right? Why would you do something like that?
John slammed the table, his face turning red.
Oh, you were planning to continue with the shop? I thought you had abandoned it since you left everything to Susan. Besides, I bought the building and the land for the shop, and it's in my name. You have no right to complain now. So, my going out was all for attracting customers. I had it all planned out.
John looked like a child about to cry because he couldn't get the toy he wanted.
If you're so confident in your skills, you'll bounce back quickly.
I coldly pushed my son away, leaving only the money for the coffee on the table before exiting the cafe. A month passed. Susan and I avoided contact with John, but bad rumors naturally reach a parent's ears. After being rejected by me, John apparently turned to his friends, asking them for money. But those friends had originally gathered around John for his money. As expected, none of them were willing to help John now that he had lost his financial power. Furthermore, John was reported to the police for stalking female customers he had approached in his shop. Although he got off with just a stern warning from the police, he was thoroughly reminded of the value of personal connections. John then completely vanished from our lives. He's probably living alone and in fear of debt collectors by now. Everything that happened to him was all caused by him and no one else. My anger towards John isn't just about his reckless spending. What's unforgivable is how he neglected Susan and James, pushing them into a difficult life. And for cutting off Susan's long hair, which she had grown out and cared for over many years, for selfish reasons. That foolish act might have robbed unknown children of a brighter future, who would have eagerly awaited Susan's hair. As someone who also works with hair, John's actions are inexcusable. John will need a long time to understand the pain Susan has endured. Susan herself doesn't speak of her emotional pain, but it's clear she's hurt. She seems to keep her feelings to herself, not wanting to worry me. Wanting to help somehow, I asked my fellow hairdressers to make a wig especially for Susan. It won't make up for my son's mistakes, but please use this.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Susan smiled and thanked me, but tears were rolling down her cheeks. Using my back pain as an excuse, I asked Susan to help out in the shop. Susan threw herself into work, as if trying to forget her emotional scars. When customers spoke to James, he would burst out laughing. Now, there are customers who visit the shop just to see James. Susan, gradually regaining her physical and emotional strength, has started to take steps towards divorcing John. The presence of Susan and James brightens and enlivens the shop. Drawn by Susan's cheerful atmosphere, many women, also raising children, started coming to the shop as customers.
All right, let's work hard and do our best.
Today, like any other day, the shop is filled with smiles. In the corner of the shop, James is sleeping soundly, making cute little snores.
This person hasn't regained consciousness even once since being brought to the hospital.
Yes, that's right. It seems her body became weaker after a fracture before.
Then it's about time, isn't it? I'll prepare the funeral wreath.
As I was speechless at my assail Nancy's words, Nancy, without showing any concern for me, looked down at Mom lying in the bed and said,
So, I can finally say goodbye.
And laughed mockingly before walking away. I was dumbfounded, unable to understand and too stunned to even feel angry. I sat down, placed my hand on my forehead, and sighed. This was too harsh to be a joke. Not funny at all. Is it even right to say such things about one's own parent? I don't have children, so I don't know, but I think I would be sad if my daughter spoke to me that way. As I thought this, my MIL Barbara, who had been unconscious, slowly began to rise.
Oh my! Barbara!
I woke up because I heard Nancy's voice. That's right, there was something I wanted to tell before I die. Barbara spoke to me with a clarity unexpected from someone who had been unconscious. And I will never forget the smile on her face. Just 3 days later, Barbara passed away in the hospital where she was admitted. It was around the time when the buds on the cherry tree visible from the hospital room window were just beginning to bloom. My name is Linda. I am 58 years old this year, and my husband David, who is the same age, and I have lived a peaceful life without any major fights or troubles since our marriage. The only regret in our lives was not having children, but after we both turned 50, we stopped worrying about it from the bottom of our hearts and started looking forward to how we would spend our retirement together. David had been running a chain of eateries for a long time, but was transferred to the headquarters for his skills, and now he is in charge of several stores, leading a busy life. As a housewife, I tried my best to support my busy husband by always being frugal and ensuring he could truly rest when he came home by keeping the room clean and always arranging flowers by the living room window every weekend. I don't know if David is interested in flowers, but arranging seasonal flowers in a vase became my only hobby, hoping it would bring him some comfort. That's an unusual flower, isn't it? Lily of the valley? David pointed at the flower on the table and said to me. Without touching his breakfast bread and with a cup of black coffee in one hand and the newspaper in the other, he shifted his gaze to the flower. It's a snowdrop. In a small vase made for single flowers, a delicate white flower blooms downward at the tip of its slender stem, presenting a cool demeanor. The white flower, mistaken by David for a lily of the valley, is a cute flower that tells us of the arrival of spring in our garden. They bloomed in the garden's flower bed again this year. I decorated with a few because they're so cute. They might wither quickly since they don't take up water well.
I see. They're beautiful.
David folded the newspaper on the table and quietly murmured as he looked at the flower again. How has Barbara been lately?
What do you mean?
Are you in touch? Aren't you going to visit during the holidays this year? Even though we didn't have children, we still visited each other's parents a few times a year. However, recently, David has been busy with the opening preparations of new eateries he's in charge of, making it difficult to take a long break. David folded the newspaper, looked up at the clock on the wall, and stood up. That was my cue to hand him his lunch. Take care. Will you be home early today?
Not sure. Oh, no. I'll be home early today,
David said while looking at the calendar on the wall. Today was their wedding anniversary. After David left the house, I started preparing to make the special meal I had planned for today. The sunlight streaming through the curtains grew stronger, signaling it was noon. I was heating up last night's dinner in the microwave when the phone rang. The landline, which rarely rings. It was mostly unused, but calls from relatives or Barbara usually came through it. So, when the landline rang, it often meant something had happened with the family, and I picked up the receiver a bit nervously. Hello? It was Barbara on the line.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Barbara greeted me in her usual tone. Sorry for calling out of the blue. David's not there, I assume, since it's a weekday. There's something I wanted to ask him. I see. I'll pass the message when he gets back. That would be great, thank you. Actually, Barbara explained that she had fractured her right leg recently when she missed a step on her staircase at home. She had called an ambulance herself and received treatment, but now she was finding it difficult to do shopping due to her condition.
Having a fractured leg is really troublesome. I've been able to take care of myself until now, but even small tasks have become difficult at this age.
I see. If it's okay with you, I can help out. I'm a housewife and have some free time.
What are you talking about? I know because I was a housewife too. It's tough being a housewife. Husbands expect more than just ordinary housework as if it's a given. Isn't David being demanding?
I chuckled over the phone. David is very kind and wouldn't get upset over me cutting corners with the housework. I thought Barbara, being his mom, must understand this even better than I do, maybe even more than I realize. That night, David came home unusually early. We enjoyed a delicious dinner together, sipped on slightly expensive beer, and reminisced about funny stories from when we first met. The cake David brought home was a cheesecake from my favorite shop. The shop was in the opposite direction of his workplace, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought that he went out of his way to choose my favorite shop instead of one nearby. After dinner, while doing the dishes, I told David about the call from Barbara. David came to my side while I was washing the dishes. What did you say? I wiped the washed dishes with a towel and put them back on the shelf. Barbara fractured her leg at home. She asked if you could take her to the hospital and for shopping, maybe once every 2 weeks, by car.
Once every 2 weeks? She's really holding back. Actually, someone needs to take care of Mom. Life would be uncertain otherwise.
I know it might be presumptuous, but when I offered to help, she refused. She told me to take good care of you instead. David laughed heartily and then immediately turned serious. With Fael gone, there had always been concerns about Barbara's living situation. David, somewhat reluctantly, took out his mobile phone and, while scratching his head, "Guess I should give her a call," muttered. "Ah, it's me, David." "Sis?" "Ah, right. David walked out of the living room with his mobile phone to his ear. The call was to Nancy. Nancy is a year older than David and works in PR for a company in the city center. Honestly, I don't know much about Nancy, who hardly ever shows up at family gatherings, but I was vaguely aware that Barbara spoke ill of her, so I knew their relationship wasn't good. David returned with a grim expression and sat down. "She said she doesn't care about Mom." "That's terrible." "Well, it's not like we can do much either. Can't be helped. I know someone who arranges home helpers. I'll talk to them sometime." David acted swiftly, and by the following week, a home helper started visiting Barbara's house. Initially, Barbara complained, but she eventually accepted the fact that she couldn't manage everything on her own and expressed her gratitude for David's kindness. Years passed by in the blink of an eye. As usual, I opened the curtains to let in the morning sunlight. The snowdrops that used to bloom in our garden around this time every year were absent. While the green stems of these bulbous plants were growing, they hadn't blossomed into their characteristic white flowers. "It happens," I thought, slightly disappointed, as I yawned. The landline rang. Caught off guard by the phone ringing mid-yawn, I ended up coughing. As I picked up the receiver, my heart rate sped up when the caller identified themselves as the reception at the university hospital.
"I'll be right there."
Without asking for details, I quickly got ready and jumped into the car. I had heard that Barbara's health had been deteriorating. Frantically, I grabbed my mobile phone to inform David that I was heading to Barbara's hospital. Noticing my fingers trembling on the steering wheel, I tried to calm my nerves by taking deep breaths at a red light. It's going to be okay. It has to be. For some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about the snowdrops I had seen in the flower bed earlier. Despite their lush green stems, the absence of even a single bud made them look more like weeds, unsettling me in my current state. Upon arriving at the hospital, I found David waiting. He was in his suit, apparently having been inspecting a nearby store when I called, and had rushed over. We were just told it might be tough considering her age. David looked exhausted as he shared this with me. Leaving David outside, I lightly knocked and entered Barbara's hospital room. There, Barbara lay unconscious. Her thin arm, now much leaner, peeked out from under a white blanket, and I instinctively looked away. Despite our shock, we discussed with the doctor what steps to take next, concluding that as her family, we should care for her daily. David's job didn't allow him much time, so the majority of the caregiving fell to me, but I accepted this responsibility and continued to care for Barbara diligently. I would gently change her position and wipe her back, even though she remained unconscious. Every hour, I massaged her back and diligently rubbed her swollen legs, trying to improve her circulation. One day, I had to leave the hospital to pick up some necessities for Barbara's stay from a nearby drugstore. When I returned to the room with shopping bags in hand, I found Nancy there unexpectedly.
Nancy, you came to see Barbara.
I was genuinely happy that Nancy had come to visit Barbara. Despite everything, the fact that Nancy came to see her, even if it was a bit late, made me happy, thinking she must have been worried after hearing that Barbara had lost consciousness. Nancy glanced at me and then smirked unpleasantly, curling one side of her mouth.
This person hasn't regained consciousness even once since being brought to the hospital, it seems.
Yes, that's right. It seems her body has weakened since the fracture before.
Then it's about time, isn't it? I'll prepare the funeral wreath.
I was speechless at Nancy's words. Without showing any concern for me, Nancy looked down at Mom lying in the bed and said,
"So, I can finally say goodbye,"
and laughed mockingly before walking away. I was dumbfounded, unable to comprehend and too stunned to even feel angry. I sat down, placed my hand on my forehead, and sighed. This was too harsh to be a joke. Not funny at all. Is it even right to say such things about one's own parent? I don't have children, so I don't know, but I think I would be sad if my daughter spoke to me that way. As I was thinking, Barbara, who had been unconscious, slowly began to rise.
"Oh my! Barbara!"
I woke up because I heard Nancy's voice. That's right, there was something I wanted to tell before I die. Barbara spoke to me with a clarity unexpected from someone who had been unconscious. And I will never forget the smile on her face. Just 3 days later, Barbara passed away in the hospital where she was admitted. It was around the time when the buds on the cherry tree visible from the hospital room window were just beginning to bloom.
"The cherry blossoms will be here soon,"
I said to Barbara, and she smiled weakly. "Take me outside, in a wheelchair or anything," she had said. I never thought she would pass away so soon. After Barbara passed away, David immediately notified the relatives as per the doctor's information. While the attending physician was filling out the death certificate for Barbara's body to be transported home, Nancy appeared out of nowhere. My expression darkened instantly, and I nudged David's shoulder.
"See? Just like I predicted, right? I told you it was about time. Nancy, enough is enough. Oh dear. Because you were looking after Mom for the inheritance, you find it troublesome that someone like me shows up, don't you?"
I felt a rush of blood to my head, but David immediately shouted,
"Get out!"
he yelled. Nancy, seemingly taken aback by this, widened her eyes in surprise, but then smirked again and said,
"Let's talk after the funeral is over." About what's to come.
She then left. I clenched my fists, feeling a tightness in my chest from frustration. The funeral proceeded without any hitches, but it was a challenging time for David and me. We were utterly exhausted. Most of the funeral arrangements were made by us. We contacted the funeral home, discussed the schedule and details, and held the service. Barbara had told David she preferred a small funeral, so we only invited close relatives. Nancy called us to the smoking area of the funeral home and handed us canned coffee. She took out a cigarette from her bag, lit it, and inhaled deeply with relish.
We should sell the family home and split Mom's savings and other assets in half, right?
Nancy asked, pointing the lit end of her cigarette towards David's face. Since neither David nor I smoked, we stood a bit away from the smoking area, resulting in our voices being raised to converse with Nancy.
We're not thinking about selling the house right now. Don't you think it's disrespectful to even discuss this so soon after the funeral? I wonder how it works in such cases. Should we assess the family home's value and then David pays me half of that?
Suppressing the urge to throw the can of coffee in Nancy's face, I stepped forward, ahead of David. Nancy looked at me somewhat surprised, stubbed out her cigarette in the ashtray, and lit another one.
Actually, Barbara mentioned there was a will. A will? I haven't heard about it. On that day you showed such disrespect to Barbara, who was unconscious. Barbara told me she had prepared a will while she was still in good health. And she told me what's in it.
Barbara, on that day, had left a note written hastily on stationery about the general contents of her will and a memo stating that no one was allowed to contest it. She had already entrusted the actual will to a notary, so she couldn't show it, but she weakly smiled, saying she remembered the contents well that she had noted down. When Barbara handed me the envelope containing the hastily written note, her expression was serene, as if she had resolved any lingering regrets. Nancy, with a cigarette between her lips, read the contents labeled will. Her expression gradually hardened, and when her gaze shifted from the will to me, she stubbed out her cigarette and approached. As Nancy got closer, the smell of cigarette prompted me to grimace involuntarily.
What do you mean by this? You're saying all of Mom's inheritance goes to you guys? Don't joke with me.
I glared at Nancy with a firm stance. When Barbara handed me this will, she had held my hand, thanked me, and with a face of sorrow I had never seen before, she pleaded. Please. I couldn't erase Barbara's beseeching face from my mind.
There's one will, but there's another document Barbara left behind. She asked me to make sure it's enforced, even if it means going to court. Don't beat around the bush. Just hand it over. What is this document? It's a promissory note.
At that, Nancy slightly raised her eyebrows and placed her hand on her chin.
What does that mean?
She seemed to be pondering, but it was clear Nancy didn't understand the significance of the term promissory note in this context. That was understandable. To be honest, I was also surprised when I first saw this promissory note. Whether Barbara was meticulous by nature or just precise about financial matters, she had recorded in great detail the money she had lent to her daughter, Nancy. The record of debts, listed with dates, times, amounts lent, and reasons, filled about half of the notebook. Most entries hinted at Nancy's financial contributions to boyfriends she had dated when she was younger. After I briefly explained the contents of the promissory note, Nancy confronted me, her face pale.
She recorded everything in such detail. Always criticizing the people I dated, always something. Linda, how much does it all come to? There's at least $80,000. However, there's no mention of the interest rate, so the statutory rate would apply. The actual amount on the promissory note was about $25,000, but I lied effortlessly.
The repayment deadline had long passed, and Nancy, having some legal knowledge, would understand that this story didn't add up. Yet, I pressed on. I couldn't let Nancy take away the savings Barbara had accumulated or the family home she cherished.
The original is with a lawyer, but Barbara had one suggestion before we proceed with a claim against Nancy.
Nancy was clearly flustered by this unexpected turn of events. While contemplating whether to light another cigarette and idly twirling it between her fingers, I conveyed to Nancy what Barbara had told me. If she didn't contest the inheritance, we would let the matter of the debt slide.
Most of Barbara's savings were used for the funeral, and selling the family home will take time. If you contest the inheritance, the debt repayment will commence immediately, which would surely complicate your life.
I tried to speak as gently as possible, not wanting to provoke Nancy. David, standing beside me, looked tense, glancing back and forth between Nancy and me. Soon, a staff member from the crematorium came too. "We're ready. Inform us." Watching Barbara's body being placed in the cremation chamber was a moment of profound sorrow, even for me. It must have been even more difficult for David. Yet, strangely, seeing her reduced to ashes brought a sense of peace. As we waited for the bus to take us home from the crematorium, David looked relieved, taking deep breaths of the fresh outdoor air. I stood silently by his side until Nancy approached us awkwardly and said,
"I'll go by the will. But please spare me the loan part." "What about selling the family home?" "You can handle it however you like. But I can't pay back the loan."
After saying that, she didn't wait for our response and returned to the smoking area. David remained silent. Watching Nancy's retreating figure, he seemed to want to say something witty but eventually just looked down, resigned. Later, it was revealed that Nancy had quit her job, hoping to inherit from Barbara. She had moved to a downtown apartment and indulged in nightclub visits and luxury shopping, leading to financial distress. It was baffling how she could make such decisions. Believing there was a significant inheritance, Barbara had indeed lent Nancy a considerable amount of money, perhaps fostering Nancy's belief in available funds. Forced to move to a standard apartment and start a part-time job, Nancy's arrogant attitude led to her quick dismissal, and she eventually had to leave that apartment too. At the family court, when Barbara's will was unsealed in the presence of witnesses, it confirmed that all her assets were left to David and me, as Barbara had stated. Though it was expected, Nancy remained silent, sighing deeply and looking defeated. Nancy is now scraping by with a live-in part-time job, but we have no sympathy for her. David, her brother, shares my reluctance to interact further, and one day, the landline was removed from our home. We've decided to keep in touch only with close relatives. Yet, there's a part of me that wonders if this lonely conclusion was truly for the best. I wonder if this was truly the right ending for Barbara. Time passed, and as the first anniversary of Barbara's passing approached, having received the inheritance, we built a respectable grave and continued to live our lives as usual, mindful not to waste money unnecessarily. On a warm day heralding the arrival of spring, I noticed the white snowdrops that hadn't bloomed last year now adorning the flower bed visible through the open window. These flowers hung towards the ground, swaying like earrings. I couldn't help but step outside and bend down to admire the flowers in the flower bed. Among them were low-lying pansies and violas, adding a vibrant splash of color. I gently touched the snowdrops with my fingertips. David returned from a neighborhood stroll on his bicycle, his basket filled with various vegetables.
"What's with all these vegetables?"
"Got them from the local farmer's market. They were cheap, so I bought a bunch."
"Even if they were cheap, this is a lot."
Seeing the basket brimming with vegetables, I exclaimed, "Ah!" And with a slightly mischievous expression, I suggested to David, Let's use these vegetables to make a variety of dishes that celebrate spring.
All of them? You think we can eat that much?
Why not invite Nancy over? David widened his eyes, his smile tinged with disbelief, as if he'd misheard me. Nancy would likely have plenty of complaints about my vegetable dishes. But even if she's not fond of them, making fried vegetables might soften their bitterness, making them palatable. Still, Nancy might refuse to eat or even decline the invitation to our home altogether. Yet, if she did come over, I'd insist on showing her the snowdrops blooming in the garden. I'd bring her to the flower bed, have her sit where I am, and even suggest visiting Barbara's grave together, though she'd surely refuse. But if she found the flowers beautiful, I believe we might come to understand each other, even if just a little.
My husband, Charles, tells me he's going to marry the woman he's been seeing and asks for a divorce. Let's not waste time with property division, just leave quickly.
Sharon taunts me, as if she's relishing in my misery. Donald, too, is infatuated with a woman he met at a bar. They don't want to live with me. I'll leave, just as you wish. But before that, I'll give you a piece of my mind. My name is Joy Lynn. Named with the hope of being blessed with much joy, Joy and Joy Lynn, I am a 50-year-old woman whose life hasn't been as joyful as I'd hoped. But now my days are filled with happiness, so I can look back and laugh at the past. Let me take you back to when I was 35. I was about to celebrate my 10th wedding anniversary with Charles. We hadn't been blessed with children, and I found it somewhat painful to hear comments from those around us like, "Do you have any kids?" and "Children are wonderful, you know." Conversations with Charles had dwindled, partly because he had been promoted a few years earlier, became busier with work, and traveled frequently. I was working too, so we hardly saw each other. No wonder we didn't have children. Well, this too is a form of marriage, and it's easier on our minds. Having children or not, it doesn't matter. That's what I thought. One day, our family grew in a way we hadn't expected. It wasn't an angelic baby that arrived. Instead, it was a parents-in-law that seemed like a demon from hell. Apparently, right after we got married, the parents-in-law had been constantly telling Charles that they wanted to live with us. Charles weighed the hassle of living together against the hassle of continually refusing. As a result, he decided that living together would be less of a hassle. Surprisingly rational, or not. Hey, I didn't agree to live together. According to Charles,
I'm hardly ever home, so it's fine.
It might be fine for you. But still, as Charles said, it's fine. If the parents-in-law are good people. I had a hard time with these parents-in-law even before we started living together. They were the ones who persistently asked me, "When are you having kids?" Sharon would always say,
"The more children you have, the better," every time we met.
But you only gave birth to Charles, right? Living with such parents-in-law, it's a stomach-churning story. I wonder how living together will turn out. My expectations were quickly betrayed. Not in a good way. It turned out even worse than I thought. Donald solemnly declared as we started living together,
"We won't give you any pension or living expenses."
Then Sharon continued with a smile,
"Let's go with that arrangement."
Wait, what kind of arrangement is that? Charles also said something like,
"We both work, so we can manage without receiving living expenses."
So Charles is one of them, too. I had never been particularly dissatisfied with Charles until now. I didn't expect much from a husband even before we got married. I thought a husband who doesn't get angry easily and works hard was good enough. But now, a wave of complaints that I never had before came rushing in. Moreover, as I lived with the parents-in-law for a while, I gradually understood the real reason they wanted to live with us. Donald would often go out somewhere at night. I believed him when he said he was going out to drink with friends. But then, I found a point card from what you'd call a nightclub and a business card with Nancy written on it in the laundry. There are various types of bars, but this was clearly a service industry that directly satisfies a man's desires. I see, he likes Nancy. I can't believe he's still so energetic at his age. I thought. Of course, I meant it in a bad way. No wonder he can't give us living expenses, he's spending it on Nancy. It can't be helped. No way. On the other hand, Sharon gradually started to harass me. Moreover, she was cunning and intensified the harassment gradually, so much so that even I didn't notice at first. At first, I thought she was being kind. I could have endured it if it had just been about the way I fold laundry or season my cooking, but there were times when Sharon called me by the name of Charles's ex-girlfriend. Every time, Sharon would apologize, saying, "I remember her strongly because she was the first girlfriend Charles introduced me to. I didn't do it on purpose. I'm sorry." At first, I thought, Sharon is old, so maybe such things happen. But as it continued, I realized something was off. Speaking of which, every time I took a shower, the bathroom was always dirty. I initially thought the mess in the bathroom was from Charles and the others who had gone in before, but no one complained about the bathroom being dirty. So, without a doubt, it must have been Sharon who was in before me. There were other instances too, like when Sharon, mistakenly thinking everyone had already bathed on a snowy day, unplugged the bathtub, leaving me to shower in the freezing cold. She also once took my favorite necklace from the closet without asking and then lost it. Each time, Sharon would say, "I didn't do it on purpose. I just wasn't thinking. I'm sorry." While it's possible to accidentally shower or call someone by the wrong name, taking jewelry without permission is not something that can be brushed off as a mere oversight. I began to suspect that maybe this was all intentional harassment aimed at me. When I saw Sharon angrily sitting at the dining table saying, "My dinner is late because Joylyn came home late," I finally realized it was indeed harassment, albeit subtle. Come to think of it, Sharon hasn't done any housework since she came to our home. She throws her socks inside out into the laundry and tosses bottles into the trash without removing the labels, adding minor inconveniences every time. She complains if meals are late and if the sheets are messy, and sometimes she even throws things. I finally understood. Our home was indeed graced by the arrival of a baby. 2 of them, in fact, both big and delightfully stubborn. Exhausted from my job as a caregiver, all I wanted was to quickly escape this situation and go to bed, so I kept silently tolerating Sharon's behavior. I didn't have the energy to argue with anyone when I returned home. I wanted to rest as quickly as possible, even if it was just for a moment. While I was exhausted and didn't notice at first, it seemed that Sharon knew about Donald's night outings. When an actress appeared on TV, Sharon persistently asked Donald, "Donald, don't you like girls like her?" "You do, don't you?" The actress's name was Nancy. The same as the girl from the bar. Donald looked pale. After that incident, I asked Sharon once, "Are you okay with Donald going out like that?" Sharon replied, "If I get a divorce, I'll be someone who has a divorce history at this age, right? That's miserable, and it looks bad to society. Of course, I don't like it. But he's just playing with professionals at the bar, right? If he's not serious, I can accept it." She wasn't holding back from divorce because of her concern for Donald, but rather she feared becoming someone with a history of divorce. I couldn't understand it. Turning a blind eye to infidelity must be causing her significant internal stress. and Sharon's outlet for that stress was harassing me. By harassing me, not only could she vent her stress, but she could also avoid doing housework. It was like killing two birds with one stone. I was certain. I knew why Sharon had insisted on living with Charles. Since living with the parents-in-law, Charles increasingly made excuses not to come home, saying he had to work overtime. This house was rotten from the roots to the pillars. At this rate, even I might end up crushed under the rotten floorboards. It happened one day, about 6 months after we started living together. Charles, who rarely had the same day off, said something unexpected. "Please, let's get a divorce." It was a bolt from the blue. It turns out, Charles had been having an affair with a classmate for a long time. He even said he wanted to marry this person, and I had no clue. Apparently, they started dating just before he got promoted. I thought he was working hard for our sake, but could it have been for his classmate? Was it my fault for not paying attention to Charles's behavior, using my exhaustion as an excuse? I thought affairs only happened on TV and to people like Donald. No, maybe it's natural for Charles to cheat, given that Donald does it too.
Once this house is ready, my girlfriend and I are moving in. You can take your things and leave, Charles declared.
Sharon asked,
"What's going to happen to us?" "You can stay, my girlfriend doesn't mind sharing," Charles responded. "What a nice girl. Joylyn, don't let her get away with it if she asks for property division. We're going to use this house and everything in it." Donald chimed in. "Yeah, she's really a good girl. Especially if she's cuter than Joylyn."
Sharon shot Donald a look as if to say,
"There you go again with women."
But Charles and Donald just laughed. "These people are hopeless." I replied, "All right.
I'm fine with a divorce. There's a memorial ceremony in Atlanta soon, right? Can you wait until then? Planning on enjoying the feast at the memorial ceremony, are you?"
How pathetic.
There's no way I'm taking a woman who's divorcing me.
Just leave already. Who's the pathetic one here? Who cares about the food? Despite everything, Sharon and I, the only women in the room and both cheated on, can't seem to get along.
No, I was planning to move out on that day. Going back home is a bit embarrassing since I was cheated on. Finding a place and handling the paperwork takes time. I thought it would work out around then.
Charles, not Sharon, replied condescendingly.
If that's the case, fine.
Cheating and then acting all high and mighty. Don't underestimate me. I'll destroy everything. A week passed, and the long-awaited day of revenge finally arrived. That day, my parents-in-law and Charles left the house early in the morning to attend a memorial ceremony in Atlanta. They planned to return by evening. All right then. Let's give it a try. The garbage collection service I had hired arrived. I had them load all the furniture in the house into the truck. The sofa, the microwave, Charles' and parents-in-law's bed, and Sharon's clothes that had accumulated since moving in, Charles's favorite new vacuum cleaner, even the refrigerator and its contents. All of it gone. Ah, minimalism is wonderful. With each item thrown away, it felt like my troubles were disappearing. Next, the movers came to transport my important belongings to my new place. By evening, the house was empty. The front door made a sound. It seemed Charles and the others had returned. I decided to greet them one last time as a good wife and stood at the entrance with a smile.
"What, you're still here?"
Charles frowned openly. So did my parents-in-law.
"Oh, that's harsh. It's the last time, so it's fine to see each other's faces before leaving, right? I wanted to see your face."
Huh?
"You still care about me."
Charles blushes slightly. He chuckles. What's the big deal? Fine.
Let's have a meal together one last time, shall we?
Charles, strangely in a good mood, heads towards the living room saying this, followed by Sharon, who looks exasperated, saying,
Charles is so sweet.
Donald, on the other hand, turns to me with a proud look, saying, That's my son. I'm baffled.
Having a meal, huh? Would have been a nice way to part if there was anything left to eat. Huh? What? What? Ah!
Understanding the meaning of my words, Charles, upon opening the living room door, lets out a silent exclamation. Sharon, annoyed, peeks into the living room after Charles and exclaims just like him.
What? Ah!
Donald does the same.
Wait, Joylyn, WHY, the fridge, no, even the furniture. Appliances too. Why is there nothing anywhere?
Of course, I threw them out.
The house feels much bigger now, doesn't it? I thought it would be bad to leave old furniture for your new life with your girlfriend.
Consider it my parting gift.
Threw them out. Why? Weren't you preparing to move?
I've already moved.
You throw away things you don't need when you move, right?
Have you forgotten?
Most of the things we bought when we got married were purchased with my money. Nothing bad will happen just because I, who didn't need them, threw them away.
At my words, Charles points at me, his mouth moving but no words coming out. He seems too shocked to speak. With this, I'll forego any division of property.
Well, there's hardly anything to divide anyway.
Sharon, furious at my smile, says,
What have you done? I'll return that phrase to your foolish son. There are limits to indecency, like cheating while having a wife and then saying to leave because you're remarrying. Wasn't your upbringing at fault? How could you speak to me like that? You are such a terrible daughter-in-law. Do you still consider yourself my mother-in-law? To me, you're just another old lady.
I speak with a malicious smile, and Sharon mutters,
So ungracious.
Shaking with anger. It's a secret that seeing Sharon angry is starting to be a bit fun.
Don't you remember? If I ask for a division of this house, you can't refuse, can you? Without the house, where would you two strangers live? You sold your family home, right?
Yes, the PILs had sold their house when they moved in with us. We won't need it anymore, they had said. So, this house was absolutely necessary for them. They sided with their son's affair over his wife, probably thinking,
As long as there's a house with a housemaid, anything goes.
Hearing my words, perhaps feeling rushed, Donald intervenes.
Well, let's settle this amicably, pretending to be a good person. Yes, let's do that. Let's proceed calmly, just like the old just like Donald suggests. Exactly, you know what I'm talking about, Joylyn. Of course. By the way, Donald, wasn't your cell phone broken today? Huh? Oh, yeah. I realized it after leaving the house, it wouldn't turn on. If charging doesn't work, I guess I'll have to consult the store. There's no need for that. Your cell phone is right here.
Saying that, I pulled Donald's cell phone from my pocket.
Huh? Two identical phones? What's going on?
Donald is puzzled.
I switched the phones just before you left today. The one I have is the real one, and the one you had is a used one I bought and removed the battery. So, it won't turn on. What?
Since you aren't tech savvy, I thought you'd just give up easily thinking it's broken or out of battery. It seems like a huge success. Smiling, I get asked by Donald.
Why would you do that?
Why, you wonder?
Well, I have no clue. Speaking of which, You received an email today from your beloved Nancy saying she had a good time the other day. You email each other daily, right? I'm so jealous of your close friendship. What?
Donald gasps, while Sharon glares at him.
So, Donald, you were out with Nancy the other day? Woohoo! More lovey-dovey than with Sharon. But you should put a lock on your phone if you're cheating. You'll get caught easily. See, stop it, Joylyn, this. But I thought cheating is wrong. Charles cheated on me, and it hurt. I know exactly how Sharon feels. So, I did something nice at the end. I texted Nancy. I'm bored. Let's break up. She was furious. I was just dealing with this old man because he conveniently gives me money. Good thing you broke up safely. Oh, by the way, this is Nancy, Sharon. Your enemy, take a good look. Saying that, I showed everyone a photo of Nancy and Donald as I returned the phone. That's when it happened. Charles showed a stern expression no one had seen before. Why? My girlfriend is. What? Everyone but Charles gasped. What's going on, Charles? What are you to Nancy? No, that's my line, Dad. Why are you taking pictures with Nancy? Because I'm her boyfriend, obviously. No, Nancy is my girlfriend. Isn't your girlfriend your classmate? We just met at a bar and started hanging out. Who would have thought that father and son were dating the same person? This development was also surprising for me. Ignoring Sharon and me, who were in shock, the men started a pointless argument about who was more suitable to be Nancy's boyfriend, which eventually escalated to a full-blown brawl, pulling each other's hair. The brawl ended when Charles pulled out a significant amount of Donald's precious, thinning hair. After a glance at the soulless face of Donald, I loudly declared, "Well, I'm off to my new place. Thank you for everything. I'll be claiming compensation for the affair next time. Bye." I had said there would be no property division, but I didn't mention compensation. Sharon realized that this was a serious affair and, swinging the bag she was holding, began furiously beating Donald in a rage. Donald stood there, head hung low, as if he had burnt out completely, unable to process everything happening all at once. Watching this living hell unfold beside me, I couldn't stop smiling as I hopped on my beloved scooter and left the scene. Although it's a far stretch, in my mind, I felt like Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Oh, it's been a while since I've ridden down such a refreshing night road. This is the best. Later on, when I proposed divorce, including the alimony, Charles said, "Please wait on the divorce." It seems that Sharon is also considering divorce, and there is a possibility that everyone might lose their homes or their circumstances might change, so he wants to save as much money as possible. He said things like, "Don't you think it's pitiful for us, who once lived together, to face such a difficult situation? And we need money now, but..." I didn't care, so I proceeded with the divorce talks without discussion and took as much money as I could get from Charles and his affair partner. When claiming the alimony, I felt a bit like an outlaw, but I hadn't done anything wrong. I had just done what was natural. Well, maybe tampering with someone's phone was slightly wrong. In the end, around the same time as our divorce, it seemed that Sharon also divorced Donald. Apparently, Donald and Nancy's affair had been going on for over 5 years, and Sharon couldn't forgive that they had a relationship in private as well. I don't quite understand why bar hopping is forgivable but private relationships aren't. I thought there are various forms of marriage. Well, in the end, we're not married anymore anyway. Donald was sued for alimony by Sharon, and Charles was sued for alimony by me,
so the saying blood will out held true, and the parents-in-law are now all scattered. Sharon, having been cheated on by Donald, seemed to have grown to despise men in general, including Charles, who had abandoned me in a similar manner. As a result, Charles and Sharon, after her divorce, are slowly becoming distant, though they do have minimal conversations. Donald, jobless, turned to Charles for help but was rejected, as Charles himself was barely scraping by. Charles is juggling multiple jobs, while Sharon, who had been a housewife since her early marriage, is experiencing work for the first time with a part-time job. Donald became a part-time worker living in a cheap hotel. Charles, eager to remarry Nancy, learned that she wasn't interested. Nancy saw both Charles and Donald as mere extensions of her bar work, as convenient sources of money. It turned out that Nancy had other men besides Charles in the same capacity. Charles, having been classmates with her, mistook her for being serious and believed she was his destiny. But in reality, it was a foolish and trivial story. In the end, both men were deemed unnecessary by Nancy, even as convenient sources of money, and were discarded. From my perspective, I thought, since I'm leaving, might as well destroy everything in the process. Just as I aimed. I'm very satisfied having witnessed this spectacular collapse of a family. No one in that family valued each other, only caring about themselves. So, the outcome was, in a way, inevitable. Essentially, they were a family in name only, lacking any compassion. Now, I think it was good that I got away from that household. On the other hand, while I still come home exhausted from work every day, living alone has freed up my time as I no longer need to allocate it for someone else. I have more freedom than when I was married. Back when I was married, I hardly had time to meet my college friends, but now I can travel with them on my days off and even have time for my hobbies. In college, I was part of the choir, so I decided to join a karaoke club. It seems that one can continue to improve in music, no matter the age. I consistently win at the club's competitions and even earn cash prizes. Thanks to that, my wallet is always warmly filled. Hee hee. At the facility where I work, my colleagues suggested hosting a karaoke recreation event since I'm good at it, and it was a huge hit. I received many compliments like "you're so good," and was thrilled to bring smiles to the residents through my personal hobby, something I hadn't expected. By the way, my go-to performances are Unchained Melody and My Heart Will Go On. The lyrics of older songs are just so wonderful. I don't really understand recent songs, but I guess I should study up. Though my days aren't glamorous, I'm surrounded by friendly colleagues, trustworthy friends, and kind residents who feel like family beyond work boundaries. Finally, it seems like I've become the Joylyn I was meant to be. From now on, I aim to be someone who not only receives joy, but also shares it with others. All right. Let's do our best at work today. I'll wholeheartedly celebrate the residents' birthdays. The older lady is fired. Clean everything up and leave. Carol, the president's daughter who became the head of the design department, said, "I've been with this company for 40 years and have designed 90% of our flagship products, but she seems unaware of that. So, I decided to take action. I'll clean everything up nicely before leaving," I said, and then wiped all my PC data and resigned. As a result, Carol faced an unexpected turn of events. I'm Victoria Simmons, 62 years old. I work in the design department of a stationery manufacturer. I've been here since I was a fresh graduate, for 40 years, and I'm still active even after retirement age. I strive not to be outdone by the younger ones. I lost my husband 10 years ago, and my daughter lives alone. It's hard to say this about myself, but I've designed 90% of the company's flagship products. Therefore, I believe I hold significant value to the company. Stationery is wonderful. It's about dreams. Designing for writing, drawing, painting, erasing, measuring, making each task functional and enjoyable. These designs cater to everyone, from school children to professionals. How long I can continue, no one knows. But since I love my job, I joke with the younger employees that I'll keep going until I can no longer stand. One morning, the President Kennedy, who I joined the company with, showed up at a meeting. It had been a while since he attended. He brought a woman with him. "Good morning, everyone. It's been half a year since I last saw all of you, hasn't it? Victoria, you're looking well." Kennedy and I joined the company in the same year. He used to be in sales, and we often talked at internal product presentations. Unlike the typical arrogant son of a president, he's sincere and humble. It's been 10 years since he took over from the previous president. Today, I've brought the replacement for the department head who recently left. Kennedy encouraged the woman beside him to greet everyone. She stepped forward and greeted.
"Hello, I'm Carol Kennedy. I look forward to dedicating myself to the future growth of our company. Please, let's work well together."
Everyone in the department was surprised. No one had expected the president's daughter to be appointed as the head of the department. As you all may know, our company is planning to expand overseas starting this year. We sent Carol to study abroad for a long time for this reason. She will help us create designs that are globally competitive. Let's all unite in this effort. After saying so, Kennedy left in good spirits. Wilson, one of the colleagues, approached me.
"Victoria, what do you think about her? Carol, I mean. I've known Carol since she was a child. We've never spoken, but the president used to bring her to company recreation events. Haven't seen her in a long time, but she's grown into a fine young lady. I think the president wants to make use of her international experience. But whether she understands the design industry is another question. So, we'll see how she does, huh?"
I could sense a hint of disdain for Carol in Wilson's expression.
"Wilson, we just need to focus on our responsibilities."
"Yes, you're right. I'm sorry." However, as it turned out later, Wilson's intuition was spot on. A month had passed since Carol took charge. We continued as usual, brainstorming new ideas for stationery and designing in front of our computers.
"Everyone, I have something to say. Is that okay?"
Carol said so and walked to the center of the room. She then started speaking.
"We will start developing products for the international market next month, starting with UK. If things go well, we will establish a base in London and then expand to hub offices in various locations."
Wilson's eyes widened.
"So, as a start, we will develop new products. The ideas and designs will be decided through an internal competition."
The strategy was to sell some of our existing products while simultaneously developing new ones. The release of the new products, both domestically and internationally. It was set for 6 months later. I had a question. "Carol, is there a specific concept for the product development?" Her face, which had been amiable until then, hardened.
"The fact that I didn't mention a concept means it's the same as before. Simmons, you're our most veteran employee, right? I didn't expect such a basic question from someone like you."
I was taken aback by her unexpected response.
"If I had to say, I don't want anything outdated."
With a composed face, Carol finished speaking and returned to her desk. The internal competition was held weekly. I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if, like Hollywood movies, American origin stationery could become popular worldwide? I kept searching for new product ideas. What's different from my younger days is that the number of ideas that come to mind decreases with age. However, the quality of each idea has certainly improved. So, I wasn't worried even if I didn't come up with ideas every week. But Carol seemed not to tolerate that.
"In this past month, everyone has worked hard. We've had over 200 ideas, with Wilson contributing 20%. It's not just about quantity, especially since we don't know what the market expects. We need as many ideas as possible."
She was clearly speaking with me in mind. Unfazed, I gave Wilson, who was modestly giving a thumbs up, a secret wink.
"Well, it can't be helped if nothing comes up. But, as professionals, is it acceptable? Only 5 ideas in a month might indicate you've run out of ideas after being in the business for so long. I don't understand that world, but it doesn't seem like you're trying.
She looked straight at me, without averting her eyes even once. After the meeting, Wilson came to me.
Thanks to you, Victoria. Your way of expanding associations was amazing. Ideas just keep coming. But Carol is too blatant. It's really annoying. It's okay. It's true that not many ideas are coming out.
But, has she seen your ideas? Just talking numbers here. 1 of yours equals 10 of ours. Does she understand that?
That's all right. Maybe the British won't like my ideas. The final judgment is by the users.
Another month passed. We narrowed down our ideas and designed about 50 specific products from them. None of my ideas were selected, but about 5 of my designs were nominated. Carol seemed displeased by that.
Today, a buyer from UK, Mr. Lee, will visit us. He's agreed to take over our agency there. We hope to decide today, but at least we want to narrow it down to about 5. Especially the younger ones, look forward to it.
In the afternoon, Lee arrived and headed to the conference room with Carol. They returned after about 3 hours.
Congratulations, Wilson. I think it will be one of your 3 designs.
Carol spoke to Wilson with a big smile. He looked surprised. Later, I heard that everyone thought one of my designs would be chosen. Thank you. But, are you sure? Shouldn't it be Victoria's?
That's fine. Mr. Lee liked it, and so did I.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much.
Indeed, we can't match the sensibilities of the younger generation. Simmons, it's unfortunate, but that's how it is.
Carol said that with a spiteful look. That might be true. I have no hard feelings about Wilson being chosen. In fact, I'm genuinely happy for him. It's wonderful when my colleague makes their mark in the world. I spoke from the heart. Then, Carol's face flushed with anger.
That's so irritating. What's with this saintly act of yours? You can only come up with 4 or 5 ideas a month and still act so high and mighty. Do you think everyone respects you just because you've been here the longest?
Her words were unexpected. I never thought she saw me that way, but at the same time, my anger was ignited.
Excuse me, but how much do you actually know about design? Do you remember the process of selecting everyone's ideas and designs? None of the works you favored are left in the final selection. You lack a professional's eye. You don't understand our struggle.
At that point, she lost her composure.
Oh dear. To think you'd say such things to me. I'm a manager, you know?
She approached me. Her eyes bloodshot.
You're done here as of today. The older lady is fired. Clean everything up and leave.
I was surprised by her sudden change, but I felt no resistance to her command to leave. Though I thought her remark about being an older lady was uncalled for.
I understand. I'll clean everything up nicely before leaving. But I'm worried about what happens next. What are you talking about? Worrying about what happens after you leave? Don't pretend to care. The department will rejuvenate, and the young energy will keep coming. It's all good.
She laughed triumphantly, looking as if her anger had subsided.
I'm relieved to hear that. I'll start right away.
I said emotionlessly and began clearing my belongings. There was nothing particularly important to keep or hand over, so I discarded almost everything. I saved my designs on my memory stick, wiped the PC data, yes, erased everything. I also cleared the shared memory on the internet.
Hey, Simmons, don't forget to submit your resignation. It's the rule.
Of course. After saying that, I immediately wrote my resignation letter and handed it to her. She remarked,
"Wow, that was quick,"
and took it with a refreshing smile. I tried to appear relieved, but I couldn't tell how she perceived it. Then, until the end of the day, I went around bidding farewell to my colleagues. That night, they hastily organized a farewell party for me. Surprisingly, it turned into a chorus of criticism and complaints about Carol. I became increasingly worried about the future of the design department. The next morning, I woke up to bright sunlight. It seemed I had gotten drunk last night, for the first time in many years, so much so that I couldn't remember when last I had felt this way. I had forgotten to close the curtains on the east-facing window and slept through. Suffering from a rare hangover, I groaned while heading to the kitchen. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and gulped it down. Then, I sat on the living room sofa, feeling blank. My mind was empty, but that was a sensation I hadn't felt since my student days, which strangely made me a bit happy. However, old habits die hard. Despite not feeling hungry, I thought I should make breakfast.
Take it easy, you have all the time now,
I said to myself and chuckled. Then I thought of calling my daughter and visiting her.
Right, I should do what I've always wanted to do,
I muttered. Just then, my mobile phone rang. It was Kennedy. Good morning, Mr. Kennedy. What's the matter? Calling so early.
It's not about what's the matter, Victoria. I tried calling you last night too. Never mind that. Could you come to the office, please?
But I resigned as of yesterday.
Just come, please. This is an order. I'll be in my office.
All right. An order, that's not something one says to someone who has resigned. Yet, I thought, if he's insisting so much, it must be something urgent. I soothed my aching head with hot coffee, gulping it down as it cooled. Then, I called a taxi and headed to the office. Excuse me. I knocked and entered the president's office.
Good morning. Sorry for calling you in so early.
Kennedy wanted to hear about what happened yesterday. I explained everything, careful not to exaggerate my words or reactions.
I see. I am very sorry about that.
He expressed his deep apology.
The mess my foolish daughter made is my responsibility as her father. It seems I made mistakes in raising her. Victoria, would you consider withdrawing your resignation? We started here together, after all. Please.
I had harbored no negative feelings towards him, only gratitude for employing me for a long time. But his words caught me off guard. President Kennedy, it's not fair using our shared past like that.
So, will you?
All right. I'm counting on you.
Morning.
Saying that, he entered the design department office. I was told to wait in the hallway until called. The door was left open, so I could hear the conversation inside.
Dad, what are you doing here? Did we have a plan? Do not call me Dad here.
His uncharacteristically stern tone seemed to surprise Carol.
I have a question for you, Carol. What is it?
The two began to speak in a formal tone.
Why did Victoria resign?
Oh, as per her resignation letter. Personal reasons.
Don't lie.
Kennedy glared at Carol as he spoke in a low voice.
It's not a lie. She left because of her age.
The surrounding staff were all left speechless.
Don't lie. I've heard everything about what happened.
In that instant, Carol glanced sharply at the employees.
Someone spilled the beans.
And muttered under her breath. Suddenly, Kennedy raised his voice.
Don't make a fool of me.
Carol stood up, startled, her eyes wide open.
Victoria.
I was called and immediately entered the room. Carol's eyes were so wide open, it seemed they might fall out.
Carol, I heard it from Victoria. You don't seem to understand what you did.
She seemed to have calmed down a bit. Even so, she took a deep breath before proceeding. How do I know if her story is true?
Fool!
Carol collapsed to the floor.
Who do you think you are? Don't underestimate the real world. Listen, you don't understand Victoria's value to our company at all.
The conversation had turned into one between parent and child.
It's not just about how long she has worked,
Carol said defiantly. Kennedy was completely exasperated.
How dare you? Victoria has been faithfully serving for 40 years, designing 90% of our flagship products. She's the backbone of our company. Without her, the design department would fall apart. She's irreplaceable. You, on the other hand, are easily replaceable. Understand?
Carol was at a loss for words, but she bit her lip and glared at Kennedy.
Then you should have told me that. How am I supposed to know if no one tells me?
She spoke like a petulant child, and laughter could be heard from the staff. Carol glared at them. Seeing that, Kennedy turned towards the staff.
Everyone, I am truly sorry. This incident is my responsibility as her father. That's right, I never wanted to be in this department in the first place. Dad is to blame.
I thought my blood vessels might burst.
You are unbelievably hopeless.
Kennedy and Carol both looked surprised, caught off guard. I had made up my mind. Carol, let me be clear. You are not cut out for a managerial role. In fact, you have a fatal flaw as a professional. Your conversation with President Kennedy just now proves it. You may have forgotten, but you called me an older lady. And as I've said before, your judgment in design is non-existent. It's hopeless. Carol was still in shock. I've changed my mind and decided to come back to work, for the sake of the president and the design department. I've chosen to cherish my passion. I then said to Kennedy, I'm sorry for my outburst. He shook his head and replied,
Not at all. Thank you.
Carol was biting her lip in frustration again, this time looking down. Then, a phone call came. It was for Carol, but after a moment of hesitation, Kennedy answered it. The caller was Lee. Kennedy listened, nodding and showing surprise at times, and eventually said,
That's fine. I apologize for the inconvenience. We look forward to continued cooperation.
He hung up. It was about the selection of the design. Lee said that although my design was his top choice, he reluctantly went with Wilson's due to Carol's strong insistence and persuasion. He found it hard to discard my design and thus reached out. It seemed that Carol had come to terms with the situation. She finally seemed to surrender. She dropped like a wilting sunflower. After Lee's call, Kennedy laid out the conditions to Carol in front of the staff.
You will decide your own future. If you want to work in our company, start from the new employee training. Otherwise, you'll be assigned to one of our client companies.
Greatly humbled, Carol replied in a faint voice, Yes. After the two left, all the staff gathered around me, expressing their joy. Although it was the unfortunate outcome for Wilson, see, I told you. This is for the best. He said with a smile. Indeed, it seemed like things turned out just as he and everyone else had initially felt about Carol. That experience reminded me of how important intuition is for a designer. Subsequently, our market expansion into the UK went well. This time, we targeted teenagers. We found that the sensibilities of American and British teenagers are quite similar. While I don't think it applies to all age groups, it was a revelation. Considering the global use of social media, it's clear that sharing of sensibilities is happening faster than imagined. So, I believe that designs aimed at American consumers could also sell well. At my age, I never thought I'd be doing work with such a worldwide impact. I'm more motivated than ever. Visiting my daughter will have to wait. I guess it'll be another video call tonight.